are watching Shalom World News. I'm David Kerr from Lansing in Michigan, and these are your latest news headlines from around the world. Pope Francis is calling for a ceasefire in the Holy Land. Addressing pilgrims gathered in St. Peter's Square for his Sunday Angelus, the Holy Father invited everyone to continue to pray for the serious situation in Palestine and Israel. In particular, he asked that humanitarian aid be allowed to enter Gaza and that all Israeli hostages be freed. Israel has been bombarding Gaza since Hamas militants killed 1,400 people in Israel on October the 7th. A further 230 people were kidnapped as hostages. Meanwhile, the Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza say that more than 8,000 people have been killed since Israel's retaliatory bombing began. During his Angelus address, Pope Francis referenced the Church's vicar of the custody of the Holy Land in Jerusalem, Father Ibrahim Faltis, who recently made a plea for a ceasefire on Italian television. We too, like Father Ibrahim, say ceasefire, said the Pope, adding, "Stop, brothers and sisters, war is always a defeat, always, always." Elsewhere in the charitable agency of the Church in Australia, Caritas Australia has signed a petition calling for a ceasefire in the Holy Land, along with hundreds of other organisations worldwide. About 5,000 people attended the closing Mass for the first session of the Vatican Synod on Synodality, which has been taking place this month. The meeting has drawn together both clerics and lay Catholics in Rome to discuss a range of issues pertaining to the Church and the world. The Mass concluded with the singing of the Marian anthem, the Salve Regina. A second session of the Synod on Synodality is due to take place next year.
Pope Francis stated that people who genuinely wish to change the Catholic Church should adhere to Jesus' greatest commandment, which is to glorify God and love others. He stressed that God's love cannot be limited to our own agenda during the closing Mass of the Synod on Synodality in St. Peter's Basilica on Sunday. The Pope emphasized that the fight against all types of idolatry in today's world requires worship of Jesus in the tabernacle in every diocese, in every parish, in every community.
Vigiliamo perché non ci succeda di mettere al centro noi invece di Lui e torniamo all'adorazione, che sia centrale per noi pastori. Dedichiamo tempo ogni giorno all'intimità con Gesù, buon pastore, davanti al tabernacolo, perché solo così ci rivolgeremo a Gesù e non a noi stessi. Perché solo attraversando il silenzio adorante della parola di Dio abiterà le nostre parole, perché solo davanti a Lui saremo purificati, trasformati e rinnovati dal fuoco del suo Spirito. Fratelli e sorelle, adoriamo il Signore Gesù.
The month-long 2023 Synod on Synodality Conference, which saw 365 delegates debate and vote on over 80 proposals for strengthening the Synodal Church, ended with the Pope's homily. In his homily, Pope Francis expressed gratitude and thanked everyone who traveled to Rome for the Synod, including cardinals, bishops, priests, religious, and lay people from all around the world. The delegates will be back in the Vatican in October 2024 to participate in the Second Assembly, where they will offer advice to the Pope on the theme of For a Synodal Church Communion, Participation, Mission. News Desk, SW News.
The majority of people in the Canadian province of British Columbia say that religious hospitals should not be forced to euthanize patients. The survey was conducted by the Angus Reid Institute in partnership with the think tank Cardis. It suggested that 58% of British Columbians believe that a patient requesting euthanasia in a religious hospital should be transferred elsewhere. Only 24% of respondents thought that the hospital should be compelled to go against its religious beliefs. The survey was conducted in response to a recent instance where a terminally ill patient was moved to another facility to be euthanized after the Catholic St. Paul's Hospital in Vancouver turned her away because of its opposition to euthanasia. Euthanasia has been legal across Canada since 2016. Nicaragua's authoritarian government has cancelled the legal status of 25 institutions, including a local province of the Franciscan order, as well as several other Catholic and Protestant organisations. The assets of those organisations in question will now be confiscated by the state. The The country's Interior Ministry justified their decision by saying that the organisations had not disclosed their funding or donation sources. The move is being widely viewed, however, as another attack upon the church and religious liberty in Nicaragua, which is led at present by the leftist regime of President Daniel Ortega. The French head of state, Emmanuel Macron, has announced plans to insert a so-called right to abortion into the country's constitution. President Macron said that an initial draft of the constitutional amendment would be submitted to the country's State Council within the next few weeks, with a view to changing the constitution by the end of the year. It follows a pledge made by President Macron last year in response to the repeal of Roe v. Wade by the US Supreme Court. Constitutional revisions in France require approval through a referendum or by at least 3/5 of both chambers of Parliament. Official statistics report 234,000 abortions were conducted across France in the year 2021. It's being reported that the group of the 7 richest nations in the world, the G7, are set to agree a new 11-point code aimed at promoting the safe, secure and trustworthy use of artificial intelligence across the world. According to a leaked document, the new code will provide voluntary guidance for actions by organisations developing the most advanced AI systems. The aspiration to have a new code was formally agreed upon in May during a ministerial conference with the leaders of the G7 economies, including Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, Britain, the United States and the European Union. The United Nations is raising concerns over Pakistan's planned expulsion of more than 1 million undocumented Afghan nationals. The Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights says that many of those threatened with deportation could face persecution at the hands of the Afghan Islamist government, the Taliban. This includes, they say, civil society activists, journalists, human rights activists, former government officials and members of the security forces. The deadline for the compulsory return of Afghan nationals is November the 1st. An elected local representative in Northamptonshire in England has been reinstated to the Conservative Party after having been suspended for publicly criticising pro-homosexual parades that go under the campaign banner of Pride. Earlier this year, Councillor King Lowell, who is a Christian, tweeted, quote, "Pride is a sin, not a virtue." In response, the 31-year-old was suspended from the Conservative grouping on North Northamptonshire Unitary Council and threatened with criminal prosecution. After threatening legal action of his own, however, Councillor Lowell has been reinstated. Finally, the Chancellor of the Catholic University of Eastern Africa in Kenya has urged this year's graduates to be defenders of the truth, to stand steadfast in their faith and to lead lives of service. Bishop Charles Kasonde made his remarks during this year's graduation ceremony, which was held at the university's main campus in Karen in the capital city of Nairobi. That's your latest news headlines for now. Do join us for more tomorrow. You can also join us at swnews.org for news updates. Shalom.